A system window appeared that the jury began voting on the divine punishment for the case of the Council of Gods. Whenever danger befalls, a person remembers a god, be it Jesus, Buddha, or another deity. They think about the one they worship and pray for salvation. But if a god needs help, a system window appeared that the votes were counted, a decision was made. Changsun was lying with his eyes closed. He opened his eyes. The guy looked up and wondered where he was. He stood up and thought that he probably died, since death is a word related to this system of the universe, but more precisely, he was destroyed. A system window appeared in front of him. It said that an error occurred, login, access is denied. The system reported that it was not working correctly. You need to clarify the reason with the administrator. The hero looked to the side and thought that his divine status, position, and faith were cancelled, and his divine powers were destroyed, but why was his mind intact? He looked to the side. Someone was approaching. There was a gray-haired man standing on the boat. He asked if he was the light of the gods, Lee Changsun. The man looked at him and said that his father was Lee Jo-myung and his mother was So Yu-ha, born in Korea, December 25, 2001. The hero looked at him. He said that for unknown reasons, he went to the planet Arcadia in 2027, reached the top, brutally killed millions of other gods, then was caught and sent to execution. The gray-haired man looked forward and said that he looked exactly like him. The hero rushed forward. He extended his hand. It landed right in front of the man's face. He jumped back. The man in the hat grabbed his sword. Changsun extended his hand forward. He frowned. He prepared to attack again. The gray-haired man blocked his blow. There was a surge of energy. The man looked at him in shock. The guy pursed his lips. He prepared to strike again. The unknown man gritted his teeth. He jumped back and stood on the boat. The gray-haired man widened his eyes. The hero was walking towards him. He was wiping water from his face. The guy clenched his fists. Cubes flew towards him. Changsun looked to the side. His hands were shackled by the steel of divine suppression. No matter how skilled a god was, the restriction could weaken him to the level of primitive creatures. The hero gritted his teeth and thought that he had not seen them again after the divine judgment, so he thought they would not meet again. He asked the stranger who he was. The man smiled and apologized for introducing himself late. His name was Yule, the Reaper of the Underworld. The guy asked if he wanted to. He said that this was the afterlife. He confirmed. He frowned and said that he heard that for a god sent to divine judgment, destruction is inevitable. Then why is he in the afterlife? Yule smiled and said that it was because he was originally in their jurisdiction. He smirked and said he would tell them everything along the way. The one who brought him here was waiting. Changsun frowned. The Reaper said that Arcadia was a planet completely different from his home planet Earth. The guy asked if this had anything to do with what he had said earlier. The gray-haired man said that all people live for a certain amount of time, and their fate is written in the Book of Life and Death. He looked ahead and said that the Book of Life and Death can only have power where it was written. The hero looked at him. The man smiled and said that one entry suddenly disappeared. They tried to find it, but it ended up in a rather peculiar place. Changsun asked if he meant Arcadia. He confirmed and said that he became a god and caused a serious mess. They had to lose a lot for him to be here. The guy looked ahead. He remembered his past. The brunette turned and asked why they were doing this. It would have been more profitable for them to let him disappear on that planet. Yule said he was just following orders. The man asked him who gave the order. The man smiled and said the name Thanatos. He said he was the leader of Tartarus and Erebus. Some called him the Lord of the Underworld. Yule said they were there. He turned around and said not to fall behind. They teleported. The Reaper said there was a hell of fire underneath them. Then there was a glacial hell underneath them. They flew past strange creatures. Changsun looked away and said they were different. What were they? Yule looked at him and said he heard he was a fighting god before he started to overthrow the gods. The hero frowned when he said it was in his interests. They were fallen gods. The man said Thanatos not only judges the souls of the dead, but also seals evil gods. The guy looked at him and said he had heard of this before. The Reaper frowned and asked if he would talk about it if it affected the reputation of the sky. He said that they were flying over sinful people who were sentenced to hard labor. They arrived at the castle. The gray-haired man said that they were there. He bowed, introduced himself, and said that by the king's order, he brought the light of the gods. The doors opened. A voice said to come in. A system window appeared, that the atmosphere was oppressive. Two eyes watched the hero through the darkness. Changsun smiled. He frowned and thought that it seemed like it would be fun. The guy looked ahead. He frowned. Then Otto smiled and asked if he was the light of the gods. He narrowed his eyes and said that he would ask one thing first. If he continued to live on Earth, where did he think he would go after death? The guy closed his eyes and said that he had not thought about it. His pupils contracted when the god said that he would go to hell. Changsun looked at him and asked why. Then Otto narrowed his eyes and said that June 21st, 2024 was the dawn of his gaming activities. He recalled how the hero cursed an ally for his mistake, and the ally took it to heart. The boy frowned when he asked what punishment was due for such an offense. Yule bowed his head and said that the sinner would be sent to hell, where his tongue would be torn out for 15 days. God spread his hands and said that he heard. The hero gritted his teeth when they told him that on April 9th, 20,224, while immersed in the game, he ignored a friend who needed support. For this, the sinner would be sent to a mountain of knives. Sweat began to pour off him when they told him that in September 2017, he crushed an ant on the way to school. Since he killed a living creature, he would face a 4-day stay in the hell of poisonous snakes. The man also added that in April 2009 he wet the bed and blamed it on a dog. For this he deserves another 10 days without a tongue. The hero blushed when he said that in 26 years he never held a girl's hand. For this 6 days in the hell of darkness. The brunette frowned and asked who they were pretending to be. Yule looked at him. Then Otto smiled and said that it was a joke. On Earth he was an ordinary person, but he changed a lot in Arcadia. A scroll appeared in front of him. It said that the hero was ruthless in battle. Changsun darkened and asked what they meant by this. What was the point of saving him? The god looked at him and asked him to do him a favor. He grinned and said that there are gods who broke the oath and ended up in the human world. He wants him to find them. The hero smiled and asked if he will be reborn. Then Otto frowned and said that he would simply return him to where he belonged. He waved his hand. Space appeared around them. The guy looked up. His eyes widened. In front of him was the planet Earth. God smiled and told him to watch out so that his eyes don't fall out. He thought he was emotionless, but it turns out he wasn't. The brunette looked ahead and said that this was his home after all. Then Otto grinned and said that he would pass out from what he saw next. Changsun looked ahead in surprise. The vision approached the planet. Korea appeared. The vision approached the city. A street appeared. And suddenly a guy appeared. He turned around. It was Changsun. The guy widened his eyes. He lowered his head and said that this couldn't be. God looked at him and said that he would send him there. He grinned and said that he would look for the gods in his place. This was his sentence. The brunette frowned and asked why he was giving him such a job. He raised his hand and said that he was the best for it. The man smirked and said that he would be able to find Ahura, Dava, Chen, and the other gods of Arcadia. He looked at the hero and said how he thought the entrance to the underworld had been torn apart. The hero looked at him and asked if it was breaking the oath that they wanted to go to Earth. Thanatos said that they were already very close. He asked why the underworld was not doing anything. The god folded his hands and said that it was because they knew all about the oath. The guy looked at him when he said that they could not go to another world, but a person could because the oath did not mention such a prohibition. The brunette smiled and asked if they wanted him to be their personal hunting dog, and when the deed was done, they would simply get rid of him. The god raised his finger and said that this was correctional labor. When the deed was done, he would release him from his chains and grant him a new life. The boy looked away. Then Otto smirked and asked how about a deal. He thought it was in his best interests. He raised his hand and said that he would not send him away for nothing, but would give him something. The brunette frowned and asked what he would give. He smiled and said that he would give power. The hero looked at him. He frowned and asked if he was sure that was possible. It was probably against the rules of the afterlife. The god grinned and said that he was the ruler of the afterlife. This could be considered a gift from the ruler. Did he agree? The guy smiled and said that if he gave him power, he saw no reason to refuse. Thanatos opened the scroll and said that it was wonderful. He looked at the hero and said that reincarnation was beginning. The brunette smiled when he said to get ready to open the gates of rebirth. They floated down the river. Yule turned and said to remember that he was a man now, not a god. He would start all over again, losing his abilities. Changsun looked at him and said that he would keep it in mind. The priest said that his soul was still limited by the divine suppression steel. He should keep in mind that if something suspicious was found, it would take effect again. The man smiled and told him to go. There was a gate in front of them. The hero rushed towards it. The doors opened for him. He turned around and said that if he was lucky, they would see each other again. The gray-haired man lowered his head and said that he would wait. The guy jumped out of the door. Yule's face darkened and said that he should always remember that he was a reaper who was granted power by the Lord of the Underworld. Changsun flew down. He spread his arms and a system window appeared that he had successfully passed the gate of rebirth. He was being connected to a new server. The system was being updated. The hero closed his eyes. A system window appeared that his title was administrator. He closed his eyes. A system window appeared welcoming him to planet Earth. The guy opened his eyes. There were people around him. A system window appeared that the memories of the past life were preserved and all the characteristics were +5. Changsun looked at the screen and thought that even the smallest details were loaded. The girl looked up and asked what was going on. Suddenly a passage appeared. She had never seen it before. The hero looked at her and thought that she was dark-haired, brown-eyed, spoke Korean. He smiled and thought that he had returned. The guy opened his eyes. He stood up, looked up. There was a forest around them. He remembered how Thanatos told him that he needed to explain something to him. He looked at him and said that the place where he would wake up was both Earth and not. The guy asked that since it was extremely difficult to get to another world without being noticed, then where would he end up? God folded his hands and said that he would end up in a random rift. Someone was crying and saying that his phone was not working, asking to let him out. A system window appeared that the current number of participants was 431. They were welcome to the Rosewood Forest. A system window appeared that an error occurred. A participant was skipped. The total number was recalculated. The hero looked ahead when it was announced that the mission was starting, and the participants were divided into difficulty levels according to individual abilities. A system window appeared that they needed to defeat the monsters that were hiding in the forest and climb to the top of the mountain. All participants had access to their inventory, their status and skills. Everyone looked ahead. A system window appeared that they wished everyone good luck. Changsun rushed forward when a system window appeared that the first section was open. He ran forward. They shouted after him to be careful because it was dangerous there. Everyone looked after him. They opened their mouths in surprise. Someone said that he looked familiar. The girl looked ahead and asked if it could be Tyrant. Changsun ran forward and said that he had not run that far, but he was already out of breath. He frowned and said that he needed to check his status first. He asked to open the system window. The system window appeared that the window could not be opened. He did not have access. His rights were revoked. The window said that the system was partially restored. The window was opened by the administrator. The system window appeared in which the information on the main character was written. Changsun frowned and said that he thought that there would be nothing there, but where is what the Lord of the Underworld promised him? The system window appeared that the window was updated and the player's information too. The window said that he has the power of soul sucking. The guy thought that due to the power he has over souls, the Lord of the Underworld is highly respected. He thought that among all the powers, soul sucking gives him some power and even allows him to use the flames of purgatory. The hero realized that by defeating the monster, he can extract its soul and take experience. He thought that in battles, he could avoid exhausting his stamina and accumulating injuries, and when he needed information, he could summon souls and send them to search for the answer. He remembered that the amount of power constituted the power of a god, and if he used the executioner's sword against the gods, he could take over their power. He realized that in theory, this meant that he could gather all the power and become omniscient and omnipotent. The brunette smiled and thought that at least he was not deceived. He looked ahead and thought that it was not easy for Thanatos to become the Lord of the Underworld. It seemed that the gods of other worlds were angry with him. He smiled and thought that using the executioner's sword was still too difficult. He paused and thought that if we consider the skills individually, the executioner's sword is better than soul-sucking. But the guy frowned and thought that this was not an easy weapon. His opponent must be a criminal who completely violated the covenant. He waved his hand and thought that even if he couldn't fight back, he would be seriously injured while holding the sword. He prepared to attack. A system window appeared that he had been detected by the Black Mamba. The monster screamed. The hero grinned and thought that he would become stronger very quickly. He cut the enemy. Changsun extended his sword forward. A system window appeared that he had killed the black mamba with one blow. The hunting season deity was interested in him. The guy smiled and said that he would become the newcomer that would make everyone drool. The dungeon. Let people fear it. It is one of the few opportunities to start a new life. Just like the gods and stars, after completing the dungeon mission, they can choose a priest to spread their teachings. They choose apostles to carry their will to the world. Crowds enter the dungeon to receive the power bestowed by the gods and stars, and die in their thousands without receiving divine attention. For the arrogant gods and those who have reached the top, the pitiful creatures doomed to die do not change their interest. Only a few are honored if they meet the requirements. The hero thought that they could show that they have a special gift. He killed another monster. The guy smiled and thought that if the deity of the hunting season was interested in him, then this is a jackpot. Deity hunting season. Her real name is Pablsag. She is the goddess of war, uses various weapons to truly enjoy hunting. But the jackpot that Changsun spoke of is that her mother is the primordial dragon of evil, Tiamat. The brunette smiled and thought that such a large jackpot was so soon interested in him. He hoped that the technique of the rusty dagger will impress her. A system window appeared that the deity of the hunting season was interested in the technique he wanted to show her. The hero waved the knife. He smiled and said that he would show her what she wanted. He smelled it. He looked around and thought that the air of the first half of the forest was filled with poison, so the monsters were already poisoned. The hero smiled and thought about whether it was time to go to Plan B. Two monsters appeared behind him. He grinned and said that he would use the snake hunter jump. It would work perfectly. He killed one monster. A system window appeared that he had killed a black mamba and received experience points. He killed the next monster and a system window appeared that his level had increased. The guy smiled and stabbed the monster with a knife. A system window appeared that he was killing black mambas with amazing speed. 3 more monsters attacked him. A system window appeared that his senses were becoming more accurate. He killed all the enemies. A system window appeared that thanks to the revival of enemies, he had improved his concentration ability. The hero turned around. The snakes looked at him with fear. A window appeared in the system that they remembered him as a blood enemy. Changsun smiled. He killed monsters and got the title of Black Mamba Slayer. The guy frowned and thought that he was killing more and more, only having time to wield a dagger. Such excitement he could only feel on the battlefield. His eyes glowed red and he thought that when this feeling made him afraid in Arcadia, at the same time it brought him satisfaction. He remembered how everything was taken away by the decision of the Divine Court. They locked him up because he was destroying the world. He wondered if this was really the reason. What a cowardly excuse. He thought that they were just afraid that a mere mortal could rise up against them. The brunette frowned and thought that he didn't have such intentions at first, but since these rats were so afraid, he would do it. He smiled. A system window appeared that his technique had been improved. He had obtained a new one, and the deity was amazed by his exceptional dagger technique. The hero smiled and said that that was not all. A system window appeared that his stamina had run out. He needed to recover. He needed to return to the safe zone and rest. He activated soul sucking. Energy glowed around his hand. He clenched his fist. A system window appeared that the purgatory flame had been used and he had successfully taken possession of the black mamba's ashes. The boy frowned when he was told that his powers had been restored. A system window appeared that the deity hunting season did not understand what type of ability he had. She was confused. The hero ran forward. He looked up when a system window appeared that the deity hunting season was confused. He smiled and thought that she had no idea that a newbie who had just entered the dungeon had actually received the approval of the Lord of the Underworld. Obviously, she was thinking about the abilities and tools that participants received at the beginning of the mission. The brunette grinned and thought that even if she was very interested, she would not have taken a step towards some strange guy because of the closed principle of causality. He thought that there would not be a single madman who would decide to violate the principle of causality to look at the data of a newbie. The guy was holding a knife in his hand. He turned around and thought that he did not care even if he was found. The hero killed the monster and thought that he was under the protection of the underworld. A system window appeared that he had successfully defeated the last mamba. He opened the system window. The guy said that his level and status were increasing. With the achievement he received magical power, now he could use skills. A system window appeared, saying that he had attracted the attention of a certain god and needed to earn his favor with achievements. He smiled and said that Pablsag's interest had only grown higher. The brunette looked ahead and thought that he had already dealt with the black mamba, so the red and bloody ones were next. He looked down and thought that he had poison resistance. Although it was weak, he should be able to deal with it quickly. The blood mamba was considered the head of all mambas. It was scary for beginners even at level 10, but Changsun wanted to defeat it alone. He smiled and thought that this was a good opportunity to attract the attention of the gods, but more importantly, he said that he needed to get the blood mamba's poison fang to gain full poison resistance. Although the superiority in numbers was one of the reasons why the light of the gods was defeated, the physical weakness from the poison and potions also affected the outcome. The guy gritted his teeth and thought that he needed that fang. He looked at the dagger. A system window appeared that his condition had worsened and he had broken. The hero exhaled and said that it was strange that he had lived to this point. Something flashed in the sky. A sword pierced the ground. The smoke cleared. Changsun said that it was made of dragon scales, which meant that it was a weapon from Tiamat. What were they thinking about? The guy smiled when a system window appeared that the deity of the hunting season wanted to bet him on this gift. In case of failure for wasting her time, she would kill him. The brunette looked ahead and thought that they were telling him so right away that if he lost, he would die. They thought that they were the most important, and the rest were just toys for them. He took the sword and thought that this was why he hated the gods and constellations so much. The guy smiled and thought that now everything had turned out for the best. If everything went well, he would end up in the black. He swung his sword and thought that if he got the weapon, he would become incredibly strong. He frowned and asked what was required of him. A system window appeared that he had made a deal. The window said that the deity laughed at his overconfidence. The mission hunter's satisfaction was created. The players were told to gather in one place. Everyone looked at the man and said what was going on. Why is he acting like a boss? The guy showed his ID. He frowned and introduced himself as Heeseong, a C-rank player under the Military Defense Support Command. He looked ahead and asked them to follow his instructions. The participants looked at each other and decided that it was good that there was at least one player among them. Someone asked what would happen to the guy who ran away at the beginning of the mission. The others answered that he ran away because he was sure that he would make a fortune. The guy smiled and said that he probably had more money than all of them put together. The brunette looked at him and asked how he knew. He replied that he was Tyrant, the leader of Sint. He said that despite his terrible character, his beauty attracted many advertisers. He was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Someone looked forward and asked why he disappeared then. The brunette replied that he heard that he started drinking heavily after ending his gaming career. He smirked and said that maybe he got tired of living and decided to commit suicide. The guy looked at him and told him to shut up. He asked what he said wrong. A system window appeared. It said that all the black mambas in the dungeon were killed. Everyone looked at the news in shock. The girl looked at the window and said that all the participants were in the safe zone, but the monsters were killed. Heeseong looked in shock at the system window, which said that the white worm was killed, all the blue crows and red mambas too. A system window appeared that the Changsun player was furious. The player frowned. Chungi looked at the window and asked how this was possible. He frowned. Changsun was sucking out the souls of the opponents. He smiled. A system window appeared, saying that he had received a mission. The window said that the deity of the hunting season had slowed down its development, began to show interest in strengthening the faith of its priests. However, all the worthy beings were currently patrons, so it had no choice but to keep an eye on newcomers. The deity of the hunting season found the hero's abilities unique and saw him as a candidate for the priest's position. The boy frowned. The system window said that it was impossible to confirm the title since he first needed to obtain a certificate. To do this, he needed to defeat the blood mamba within 24 hours with the provided sword. The boy looked at his sword. He thought that it was no wonder that they were so interested in him. It seemed like they had urgent matters to attend to. He thought that recently there was a serious conflict between Tiamat and Bel Marduk. Maybe this had something to do with it. He smirked and thought he wasn't sure, but if it was true, he was very lucky. The brunette looked at the sword and thought it was a difficult weapon. He frowned and thought that was exactly what he wanted, but the more difficult the task, the better. Changsun smiled and asked if they would like to increase the bet. A system window appeared that the deity of the hunting season tilted his head in confusion. The brunette smiled and said 30 minutes. The system window said that the deity of the hunting season was still confused. The hero looked ahead and said that he would kill the mamba in 30 minutes, he would give her even more fun, and she would reward him. There was silence. A system window appeared that the deity found his request funny. She accepted his request. The guy smiled and thanked him. A light appeared in front of him. A monster appeared in front of him. It struck the ground. The hero jumped above it. He smiled. He raised his sword to strike and cut the monster in half. The brunette pulled out his sword and landed on the ground. A system window appeared that the level had increased and +3 strength. Flying monsters appeared behind him. He killed them. A system window appeared that the level had increased. The system window said that some deities were watching his fight with the hunting season with suspicion. The guy killed the monster. He turned around. A bloody mamba appeared in front of him. He smiled and thought that the more spectators, the better. A system window appeared that the deity hunting season was surprised by the number of unexpected guests. She was warning everyone who showed interest in him. The hero hid behind a tree and thought how many gods had already gathered there. He hoped that there was at least one worthy one. Changsun smiled. A system window appeared that he had reached level 10 and a secret class was available to him. He frowned and thought that in his past life he was a spearman, but this time he would go higher. Either the Dragon King or the King of Darkness would do, but this is not easy to achieve. He thought that if he had to choose, the Berserker was the best. He thought that the Berserker had a strong attack, but lost his mind, but this could be circumvented with additional measures. The guy smiled and thought that he needed to choose the Berserker to complete this stupid deal. His eyes widened. He thought that this monster was difficult to defeat even for level 20 players. A system window appeared where he was offered classes. He scrolled further. The system window said that the secret class of the Rune Keeper was available to him. The hero tensed up. He looked ahead in shock and thought that the Berserker class was not there. A system window appeared, saying there were 6 minutes left. A huge poisonous snake was crawling through the forest. The hero was hiding behind a large tree. He was puzzled. The guy frowned. When he agreed to the deal, he was counting on a Berserker, but there was no such class. The deity hunting season is interested in whether you will make it in time. 3 anonymous gods are interested in your choice of class. The guy frowned and thought that there was only one way out. 30 Rune Keeper, secret. Changsun clicked on the system window. He thought that drawing runes was, of course, boring, but in terms of destructive power, this class is more powerful. These abilities will be able to compensate for the lack of combat abilities. You have chosen the Rune Keeper class. A blue glow appeared around the player. Class changed. Glare was displayed in the man's eyes. Your agility has increased by 5. Magic power has increased by 5. A new characteristic, intelligence, has been added. Added a new stat, will. Class skill, beginner runecrafting created. The hunting season deity is amazed at your choice. An anonymous god laughs at your choice. The boy extended his hand. 2 glowing orbs appeared above it. Beginner runecrafting. As the skill level increases, the probability of successfully creating a rune increases and the production time decreases. Skill level 1. Category, class, active, creation. Effect, create runic letters. Beginner runecrafting. Allows you to create runic letters on the intended object. The desired object will change from objects to people as the skill level increases. Skill level 1. Category, class, active, engraving. Effect, magic gift. The boy chuckled. This is just what he needed. He still has about 4 minutes. Changsun extended his hand forward. 2 glowing rings appeared around it. You have added an additional 30 points to the intelligence statistic. The brunette smiled, looking at his hand. You have added 25 additional points to the will statistic. He hid behind a tree. Eyes flashed from behind. The hero jumped out. In front of him was the face of an enraged red mamba. The player clenched his teeth and jumped back. A snake struck the place where he stood. Skill, rune creation for beginners was activated. The guy turned around. His eyes were glowing. The probability of success increases in parallel with the increase in stats. He put the blade in front of him and touched it. The hero quickly ran his hand, leaving a cut on it. The bloody blade vibrated. The brunette was focused. The guy dipped his fingers in the red liquid. He thought that the skill he was forced to learn from his elders would be very useful now. The man began to draw symbols on the blade of the sword. The rune engraving for beginners skill was activated. The player was attentive. The explosion rune was engraved. Then another one. Symbols appeared on the weapon. The guy extended his hand with the sword. Now everything is ready. The deity of the hunting season anticipates your next actions and laughs. The deity of the hunting season is interested in how the newbie knows about runes. The guy swung his sword. The blade glowed. You managed to create and engrave all the runes thanks to concentration and perseverance. The skill level has increased. As a reward, you receive a 5x explosion rune buff for 1 minute. The brunette grinned. The magic power has been expended. You are in a state of decline. The hero pointed the weapon at the enemy. The snake opened its mouth. There are about 3 minutes left. The guy screamed furiously. This time is more than enough. An explosion occurred in the forest. The players looked in the direction of the sound. Heseong looked ahead, puzzled. He thought that the sounds of explosions had been coming from the forest for a long time, but this one was much more powerful than all the previous ones. The people pointed towards the mountain. Smoke was rising behind it. They did not understand what was happening. A notification appeared in front of them. The Changsun players started attacking the boss. The boss was a bloody mamba. People were shocked. The guy with blonde hair was furious. He shouted that this idiot wanted to kill them all. The blonde frowned and said that he did the same in games too. He just does whatever comes into his head. He ran up to the lieutenant and asked him to do something. The man silently frowned. The young man panicked and shouted that they would all just die. The soldier, without turning around, repeated to everyone to stay where they were. The player looked at him in surprise. Heseong looked calm. He said that everyone would die if there was even the slightest destruction. The man frowned and looked away. The blonde gritted his teeth and cursed. The lieutenant squinted. He looked at the smoke-covered sky. Bright flashes were appearing in it. If he was right and this light appeared when he dealt a critical hit, he couldn't even imagine what this guy was capable of. Bright lights appeared every second above the forest. The soldier's face was gloomy. He thought they had a chance. The man stood in the direction of the battle. Noise and gusts of wind came from there. What was going on there? Flashes lit up the sky. The hero was fighting a huge snake. His face was distorted with rage. Another explosion. Then a column of smoke rose up. A new notification appeared in front of the players. You have successfully defeated the first boss, the Blood Mamba. The lieutenant was shocked. You have successfully completed section 1 of the dungeon mission, Exploration. The temporary rating will be summarized. Dungeon rating. Total 5,000 points. First place, Changsun, 4999 points. Second place, Heseong, 1 point. Third place, no data. The brunette stood at the site of the battle among the smoke. Rewards will be given out according to achievements and ranking. The hero stood with his back to the players. The lieutenant thought that he might have witnessed the birth of one of the 10 kings. A red snake's head appeared from behind a tree. The players looked at it in fear. The mamba opened its mouth and moved forward. They screamed and jumped back. The monster fell to the ground in front of the players. Behind it stood the hero, armed with a sword. The snake was defeated. Heseong looked at him, stunned. Changsun frowned and looked at the people present. He asked if they were players. The military man looked at his interlocutor and answered affirmatively. The brunette frowned and said that he had already taken care of the boss and wanted to ask them to take care of the small fry. The man thought that this request was more like an order. Heseong nodded. The others glanced sideways at the hero. The lieutenant said that they could prepare a place for him if he wanted to rest. The boy grabbed the monster's corpse and dragged it aside under the man's surprised gaze. The runekeeper replied that he would look for a place for himself because they seemed uncomfortable with him. Everyone exhaled. They discussed whether he was really a tyrant or if it was just a superficial resemblance. The players laughed. Maybe he was a demon. The blonde boy looked tense. His face was distorted with anger. The protagonist looked calm. He chuckled and muttered that it was nothing new for people to call him a demon. Rest time before opening section 2 to 1 hour. The boy dropped his loot and looked around. The hero smiled and noted that it was not bad here. Changsun drew several symbols on the stone. The obstacle rune is engraved. A barrier appeared around the boy and the snake's corpse. Skill level increased. Skill, rune creation for beginners has reached the maximum level. A skill of a higher level is available. Skill, rune creation for advanced has been created. The brunette looked to the side and smiled. he decided that he should sort out the rewards first. 2 achievement rewards and 3 mission rewards are pending. Confirming achievement rewards. Trophies will be issued. Please select the desired category, skills, effects, items, achievement points. The guy smiled and said that choosing trophies at a low level is pointless, and now he will be satisfied with a dragon fang. He clicked on the button, achievement points. The choice was obvious. You have received 10,000 points to karma. You have chosen the 4th position, achievement points as a trophy. You have received 5,000 points to karma. Current number of achievement points, 15,000. Changsun chuckled. The guy said that the only thing that unites the human world and the realm of the gods is that wealth decides everything. You need to provide for yourself before the opening of the game store. He looked at the system window and decided to check his status. Li Changsun. Divine name, Light of the Gods, unavailable. Title, Black Mamba Tamer. Allegiance, Underworld. Class, Rune Keeper. Level, 15. Strength, 36.5. Skills, Common Dagger Technique. Level 5. Rune Engraving for Beginners. Level 9. Rune Creation for Advanced. Level 1. Snake Eye. Level 1. Effects, Weak Poison Resistance. Level 5. Soul Draining Power. Level 1. Executioner's Sword. Level 1. Unique detail, the god's interest in certain achievements can be viewed. Additional stats, 50. The hero smiled contentedly and rubbed his chin. The fight with the blood mamba was worth it. He turned at the sound. The first reward of the mission, a dragon fang, is now yours. The deity of the hunting season is showing greed. Several gods began to show interest in you openly after the battle ended. Several constellations began to chuckle. The brunette chuckled. Deity hunting season warns them once again that if they covet what is rightfully hers, they will not escape the dragon's wrath. Deity hunting season asks what you would like to receive as an additional reward. The second reward will be given. The dragon's treasury was opened. The list of rewards, Anatizen Gold Ingot, Heavenly Cup, Almighty Stone. The guy looked at the options in surprise. He muttered that there were a lot of things here. After all, this was the dragon's treasury. Deity hunting season told you to voice your wish and added that all the treasures were quite rare. Some gods were surprised by the gifts of the hunting season. Some constellations showed interest in the treasures. The hero smiled and thought that this was not enough. Pabielsag would simply lead him by the nose if he accepted the reward now. The list was closed. You have not selected anything. The player smirked. Deity hunting season frowns and wonders what you are up to. Several gods have planted doubts about your hidden intentions. The reward will be exchanged for achievement points. You have received 1 million to your karma. Changsun looked away and said that he knows that he will be able to use his savings very skillfully later. Deity hunting season makes a displeased face and offers you to become a candidate for the priesthood. The brunette waved his hand and replied that he would like to gain experience first, and he has no intention of becoming one. The reward will be exchanged for achievement points. You have received 1 million to your karma. Current number of achievement points, 2,015,000. The guy smiled. Maybe it is thanks to the deal with the gods, but he really earned a lot. Deity hunting season flares up with anger because you laugh at her. The deity says that you will regret this and growls angrily. The hero only smirked. He narrowed his eyes and thought that there was no reason for weakness. Several gods brought popcorn, anticipating an exciting spectacle. Some gods noticed your reluctance to be a candidate for priesthood. Several gods who did not believe in you now express interest in you and joy. The brunette stood and looked at the flickering notification windows. He thought that if you could convince of your high value, then many entities would rush to your side. The guy grinned. If the conflict with Bel Marduk was not a rumor, then Tiamat will need more outstanding people. The hero smiled slyly. The deity of hunting season turned his head after looking at you with burning eyes. The player looked determined. Everything was going exactly as he planned. At this rate, he would be able to move on to the next step. Changsun squeezed the hilt of the sword and was ready to begin. There's a lot to learn from this monster. It made a cut on the snake's corpse. You received blood mamba blood. You received blood mamba tendons X5. You received blood mamba eyes X2. Several gods are wondering what surprise you'll give them next. Rumors of the deal and your refusal of the hunting season's offer to become a priest have spread throughout the heavens. The gods interested in you have started connecting to channel KR9721 one by one. The current number of connections is unknown. The total number of interested gods is questionable. Forest, a safe area for newbies. 2 players were sitting under a tree. The long-haired guy frowned. He was wondering if he could do it. The other player turned to him and asked again. The young man answered if he could become a player. The short-haired guy jumped up and exclaimed that he'd gone crazy. The blonde guy said that the drunkard could do it, but they couldn't do it. He was furious. The other guy looked at him warily. The blonde guy said that he definitely could. He hadn't thought about it before, but here everyone can reveal their talents. The guy smiled confidently and said, "You'll see, a message from God." The owl deity, piercing the dim light, is interested in the abilities of the player Jian Chungye. The dark-haired guy looked at the notification in surprise. The blonde guy grinned. A light appeared above them. The clouds dispersed. A bright flash. The administrator came in. A golden pillar of light hit the ground and hit several players. The silhouette of a rabbit was visible through the smoke. A white hair in a suit with a watch introduced himself as the channel administrator, Gerald. He greeted everyone and smiled. The rabbit continued to giggle, holding a large pocket watch. The players turned to look at him. They looked at the administrator in surprise, wondering where he came from. Gerald was wiping his watch and smiling. He said that he seemed to have accidentally disturbed their rest. He took his cane and bent down. Something had happened that he needed to report. The lieutenant looked at the newcomer questioningly. The admin put his paw on his chest and said that according to the policy of the Administrative Bureau, which is non-interference and providing a high degree of freedom to the players, they try not to interfere. The rabbit raised his paws theatrically and grabbed his cheeks. He continued that there was a big jump in the rating, because of which the higher-ups were angry. The hare smiled slyly and said that he would have to adjust the difficulty. The players looked at him indignantly. The admin snapped his fingers. The safe zone sign shattered into pieces. The difficulty will be increased according to the number of achievements obtained. The safe zone will be destroyed. The aggressiveness of the monsters will be increased. The attack power and defense of the monsters will be increased. The people were in a panic. They were very nervous. The soldier also tensed up. The man frowned and thought that it was the same last time. This is a reversal. He remembered himself in the past. There were mountains of corpses all around. Heseong frowned. That time, the gods and constellations asked the administrator to raise the difficulty. They wanted to see if there were any outstanding newcomers who could become priests. The lieutenant looked gloomy. Did he really have to watch people become victims again? The man was nervous. He wondered if the gods believed in the protagonist's potential. Changsun frowned as he looked at the notification windows. Due to the increase in difficulty, the remaining rest time was cancelled. The monsters were given more freedom. They are hungry at the moment. First, repel the attack of the hungry predators. You can start forming teams. Each team must have 10 people. Participants will receive equipment according to their contribution. After successfully hunting monsters, you have a chance to get fireballs. Each team must collect 99 crystals to advance to stage 2. The girl clutched a knife in tears. The fat guy next to her held a bat. They panicked and said they had never heard of such a thing. The first wave will begin in 5 seconds. 5. The administrator appeared behind the lieutenant. The rabbit clarified that he was the player Heseong. The man turned around and asked if he really knew him. 4. Gerald grinned. A glow appeared around him. He replied that the military man was the only one who left the dragon's lair alive. The man was of particular interest to the Administrative Bureau. 3. The rabbit grinned ominously and said that he would pray for the player. 2. 1. The administrator disappeared and left the man alone. 0. The second stage begins. Heseong turned around at the scream. Demonic wolves jumped out of the forest. The players rushed to run. They grabbed their weapons in fear. Someone tried to escape. Chunyi quickly crossed the crowd. The boy smiled. His eyes glowed red. He thought that this was his chance. The owl deity that pierces the dim light shows mercy to you. The blonde boy prepared for the wolf attack. An unknown deity shows mercy to you. The hero held a fang in his hands. You had obtained the black mamba's poisonous fang. He smiled and said that he would soon gain resistance to poison. The second stage began. The brunette looked at him in surprise. The gods interested in you are wondering what you will do in this stage. The god interested in you made a bet on how you would do this time. Changsun frowned in displeasure and muttered, "Has the selection already begun?" The hero put his hand in his jacket and said that he thought he would have more time. Is it because he won the bet with Pabielsek? The brunette looked closely at the notification window. It seemed that the bet had generated more interest than he expected. The guy studied the indicators. The biggest problem was with endurance. The hero took the sword and quickly ran. He wanted to rest and recover, but everything turned out differently. A large monster appeared next to him, all on fire. The brunette frowned. It was a fire lizard. In the first stage, there was poison against living organisms, and now it was fire poison. The guy ran forward. The creature moved parallel to him. Changsun frowned and thought, "It turns out that next there will be ice poison, then metal, and finally corpse poison." The red lizard blocked his way. Flames burst from its mouth. The hero managed to dodge the fiery blow. He frowned and squeezed the sword. He needed to get to the accumulation of fiery energy. The guy ran closer and cut the lizard's side. The monster howled. Blood gushed. The creature looked at the hero. He dodged the next attack. The lizard breathed flames everywhere. The hero moved through the fiery funnel. He jumped on top and plunged his sword into the scales. Then he sharply cut the flesh. Fiery magma splashed. The lizard's head fell to the ground. The brunette landed and looked down. The player squinted and said that the stamina of a black mamba was no match for the stamina of this monster. It would be difficult to hunt flocks of such lizards. He stuck his hand into the cut and took out a red ball. The guy smiled contentedly. "You opened the fireball." The brunette opened his mouth wide and shoved the trophy into it. The hero frowned. "You successfully swallowed the fireball. You received weak resistance to fire. You received 20,000 units of fire energy." The guy breathed out flames. He ran on. The runekeeper thought that he needed to swallow more balls. This is the second condition for obtaining resistance to poison. The brunette bared his teeth. 8 trigrams of heat energy. He pushed off and jumped. There were many fire lizards below. Poison resistance is the unique ability of Changsun's old enemy, Antares, the scorpion of the 12 zodiac signs. It allows him to be immune to all poisons. It also gives him the ability to create poison to infect the blood. Therefore, although Changsun had every chance to defeat Antares, he fell under the curse of Gia, which destroyed his godhood and ultimately led to defeat. However, he ended up in the underworld. Thanks to Thanatos, the hero was able to learn more about the secret art of the fallen stars. The Lord of the Underworld said that this knowledge would be very useful when fighting almost all of the 12 constellations. The fallen stars were condemned and sent to the underworld. The 12 constellations made many enemies in pursuit of their goal. Among the fallen stars, there were those who did not like them. The so-called 10 elders shared their knowledge with Changsun, and the first of them was the shortest path to gaining resistance to poison. One fallen star claimed to have lost her daughter to Antares. She was the first to share her knowledge, so the hero nicknamed her the First Elder. The brunette swallowed several red balls. He sat on a mountain of fallen lizards and breathed out fire. The guy looked ahead resolutely and thought that with this level of fire energy, he could not light a trigram. He hurried on. He needed to find a base and get the balls of stronger and more stubborn creatures. Chunyi smiled. He cut a large red reptile with his blade. "You have defeated the fire lizard." Player Chunyi is furious. The guy frowned and bared his teeth. He thought that maybe he could surpass this bastard. Dungeon ranking. The youth's eyes widened. First place, Changsun, 750 points. Second place, Chunyi, 565 points. Third place, Heseong, 150 points. The fair-haired man was shocked. How is this possible? The young man thought that his opponent was using a shortcut. The deity of light 30 advises you to use a shortcut too. Chunyi smiled madly and said that he was ready for anything. He asked for more strength. The unknown deity said that he would help. Heseong stood with his sword over his shoulder. Tired players were sitting around him. They looked at the lieutenant with annoyance and said that this world was only for special people. They wanted to become as strong as him. The warrior looked away sullenly. He thought that everyone was tired after 3 days of fighting monsters, but envy of other players was starting to grow. The lieutenant looked tense. He understood such people because ordinary participants had gained incredible strength. And not one, but two. Chunyi came out of the forest. He smiled and said that he had received a new skill. The guy bared his teeth and said that God had answered his request, and now he knew how they could survive. A horned monster ran into the cave. It looked like a fiery ram. The monster bared its teeth and looked at the hero. The guy jumped up and cut off the enemy's head with a blow of his sword. A fireball came out of the monster. The brunette grabbed it and swallowed it. The hero turned around at the scream. The girl ran deeper into the cave. A bear was rushing after her. Tears came to her eyes. The slashing blow hit the monster. Changsun looked at the girl and asked if everything was okay. She screamed that she saw a monster. The guy looked at her with displeasure and said that it was just him. There was nothing to be afraid of. He looked at her in surprise and asked why she was alone here. The girl began to cry and answered that everyone was dead. The brunette frowned. The interlocutor added that her friends had been abandoned by someone named Chunyi. There was an owl tattoo on his arm. The blonde man said that he could share his divine power. The hero squinted and rubbed his chin. He told the girl that she had been deceived and that this was a demon's mark. She began to cry. The guy explained that this mark meant that she had sold her soul to a demon. The mark of a real owl piercing the dim light looked different. If a branded person dies, their life force and soul are taken away. The life force goes to the assistant and the soul to the demon. Chunyi absorbed it. He must have become very strong. The protagonist looked gloomily at the interlocutor's arm. He thought that this mark was quite serious. His face was distorted with anger. The brunette thought that if this was a demon, then it was so majestic that it surpassed the demon king in rank. The guy moved away from his companion. He was not so afraid. She ran up and grabbed him. The girl asked for help. Changsun looked away in frustration and thought about what to do with this child. He pointed his finger at her and asked if it wasn't enough for her that he saved her from the fire bear. The girl looked at her interlocutor resolutely and said that she was ready to wash, clean, and cook if only he would help her become stronger. The hero turned around displeased. She looked confidently into his eyes. The guy noticed something in her gaze. He asked if she wanted to avenge her friends. The girl reluctantly handed him a chocolate bar and said that it was her last treat. The brunette refused. Changsun crossed his arms and looked at his companion. He asked if she could do anything. The girl readily answered that she could do anything. The hero looked at her gloomily and suggested that they first work on the mark. The cursed player Shin Jingwing has died. Under the contract, you receive his life force. Chunyi was attracted to dark energy. The cursed player Kim Mina had died. You will receive his life force under the contract. The blonde man chuckled. His eyes were shining. He felt that he was becoming much stronger. The unknown deity was happy to see his power grow. A player approached him from behind. The blonde man turned and looked at him with a wild look. The guy was scared and decided not to say anything. He nervously looked at his hand with the mark. The player, like the others, looked scared. He muttered that the mark limited his actions. Chunyi turned towards the voice and was angry that someone was late. An injured man approached him and said that he found what the blonde man asked for. The guy with the short hair gritted his teeth and looked at his old friend with pain. He thought that the blonde man had turned them into slaves. It was like they were in a prison. Chunyi smiled and moved forward. The players behind him were exhausted. He ordered them to rise and begin the attack on the boss. His face was distorted by a grin. Black marks appeared. The guy exclaimed that he would make the protagonist suffer as he once suffered. The SV deity stares at the fury of his charges. The girl looked up in surprise. At the moment, a certain number of people are connected to the channel. At the moment, a certain number of gods are showing interest in the channel. The girl ran forward. White funnels appeared around her. Many gods are watching players who are developing quickly. The girl pushed off the ground. You activated the storm run skill. She quickly ran away from the crowd of the dead. The eyes of the walking corpses were shining. The capture rune worked successfully against the zombies. Someone was cutting off their heads. The capture rune worked successfully against the dead. The hero dealt them cutting blows with a sword. The girl turned around and looked at him in admiration. She remembered how in the cave the guy noted that she ran fast. Therefore, she will need to run away and distract the zombies that will follow her. The brunette chopped off another zombie head. He turned around and asked if it was the last one. There were corpses lying all around him. The girl ran up to him and happily said that she had collected all the monsters within a 300-meter radius, as he asked. The guy looked at her and asked about the preparations. She looked at him with glowing eyes and replied that she had done everything, checked and made sure everything worked. The girl asked if there was anything else she could help with. Changsun calmly looked at his interlocutor and told her to run as far as possible. She would not be able to resist the monsters that would appear here. The hero thought that the girl had a heavy look. The interlocutor looked at him trustingly and agreed. The girl ran deep into the forest. The guy looked in the other direction and frowned. Black smoke was flying in his direction. The brunette covered his face with his hand. It's poison. The main boss rotting plague spider appeared on the battlefield. Paws appeared above the forest. The hero jumped back. The blow hit the ground. The girl turned around at the sound. She saw a giant spider. Changsun took out his sword and stood in front of the enemy. He touched his face with his hand. Then he pulled his hand away. His eye turned golden like a wild beast. A mess of zombies. The dead groaned and stretched out their hands. The spider's legs were made of dead people and studied the stench. The monster made a sound. The brunette crouched to the ground from a gust of wind. He squinted. The deity of the snake that coils the world is impressed and will grant you something. Skill, snake eyes temporarily transforms into viper eyes. Like a snake that can instantly detect its prey, you will be able to skillfully assess the terrain, which will help you think through your next steps. Skill level 1. Category active. Effect, capture key moments, sharpen your senses. The hero squinted and looked ahead. He thought that by giving him an advantage without any conditions, the god was showing that he wanted to see what the guy was capable of. The brunette opened his eyes. He will show himself. He got a sight. He aimed at the spider's paw. The guy sucked in the fire. The weak poison resistance skill was activated. A glow and fire appeared around the hero. The weak poison resistance skill was improved. The accumulated fire energy destroyed the poison that entered your body. Changsun smiled and moved forward. Achievement received. Collected 666 fireballs. Reward, fire attribute boost. Endurance +5. The hero bared his teeth and rushed at the enemy. He jumped towards the spider's paw and swung his sword. With a slash, he cut off one paw. The monster roared. The brunette jumped even higher and looked at the spider. Changsun thought that he would need a flammable binder to ignite the flame of the 8 trigrams. He grabbed a branch. A funnel formed around the monster. The guy decided that poison would suit him best. His eyes flashed. Among all the poisons, the poison glands of the plague spider are the best. The skill allowed him to aim for the most vulnerable spot. The hero swung and jumped. He thrust the sword. As soon as the guy pulled out the blade, poison splashed out. Changsun frowned and thought that his bite was strong. He stood on top of the monster. Poison gushed out of the zombies' mouths. The brunette jumped back. The guy managed to dodge. There was acid, and his level, which he had reached in the past 3 days, was not enough. The hero frowned. The first step. He turned and ran. The spider followed him. You are leaving the battlefield. Chungyi was breathing heavily. He stopped. In front of him lay the defeated zombies. His face twisted. Could it be Changsun again? His eyes widened. A major achievement was obtained. Dungeon ranking. First place, Changsun, 29,550 points. Second place, Chungyi, 1230 points. Third place, Hexiong, 550 points. The blonde man was horrified. An unknown deity says, "You will be in trouble if you continue to tarnish my name." The boy bit his finger nervously. This is crazy. An unknown deity warns you that this is your last chance. Chungyi frowned and bit his finger until it bled. He thought that an ordinary person could not grow so much in such a short time. The young man would do everything possible to be noticed by the god again, and he did not care what methods this bastard uses. Player Changsun fights the plague spider. The boy quickly ran. He promised that he would kill the protagonist. Changsun jumped off the hill. The huge spider loomed over him. The brunette turned around. The plague puck was in an agitated state. The hero remembered how the girl assured him that the preparations were complete. He kicked off. The monster jumped after him. The spider fell into the ground. Changsun chuckled and ran on. Symbols glowed on the ground. The explosion rune was activated. The pit the spider fell into caught fire. The hero watched the explosion. The plague spider succumbed to the fire. The zombies screamed and burned. The world snake god laughed loudly at the terrifying trap you set. The penetration rune was activated. Sharp stones protruded from the ground and pierced the monster's body. He howled. The world snake god laughed at the pathetic spider that fell into your trap. Achievement received, mouse in a trap. Reward, intelligence +5, weak trap skill. The hero jumped and grabbed the rope. He frowned and said that this was just the beginning. A bloody spider poked its head out of the pit. It let out a scream. The monster's eyes looked up. Changsun was hanging above it, holding onto the rope. The guy smirked and took the sword. He said that the enemy was definitely the final boss. The brunette cut the rope. Sharpened spikes rained down from above. The spider received blows to its shell and roared. The monster tried to run. The guy rushed after the fleeing spider. He caught up with the enemy and smiled. A new trap was activated. Sharpened stakes shot at the monster. They pierced its body. At this time, Chungi ran to the scene of the fight with other players. He looked forward in surprise. His eyes widened. The guy watched as the giant spider received multiple blows. The hero continued to attack. The blonde thought that they would definitely die if they got involved right now. The demon possessed one bit his finger and frowned. He decided that he needed to choose a moment when they were both exhausted. Looking at the fighting protagonist, Chunyi thought that they would soon weaken. The guy looked ahead. It dawned on him. He grinned. The blonde turned to the players and thought that if he pitted them against the hero, his chances would increase significantly. The people looked at the guy in confusion. The demon's assistant thought that the hero was trying to avoid casualties among ordinary people, which made his task even easier. Chunyi frowned. He decided that it would be great to have an ace up his sleeve, for example, a hostage. The guy looked down and saw a girl running away. She was smiling and thinking how cool her savior was fighting. The blonde grinned and decided that fortune itself was smiling on him today. The protagonist was armed with a blade. He delivered a slashing blow to the spider. He jumped above the enemy. He looked at the monster's eyes. The guy plunged his sword into the monster. Critical hit. Flashes of light appeared around. You have successfully completed a series of strikes. The boy cut the enemy's body. You managed to bring the enemy decaying plague spider's health to a critical value. You destroyed the enemy decaying plague spider. The boy grabbed the poison glands. He stood with his hand outstretched. The hero swallowed the trophy. Energy accumulated around him. He shuddered. New level. The boy fell to his knees. The hero let out a poisonous breath. You have reached level 20. He was sitting next to the enemy's corpse. You have cleared the 5th and final stage required for Dungeon Quest Restoration. The total points earned are being counted. Dungeon ranks. Maximum points 10,000. First place, Changsun 97,450. Second place, Chunyi 2,000. Third place, Heseong 550. The Administration Bureau has awarded you additional rewards for your outstanding achievements. You have received achievement points. Several gods have taken an interest in you. Several gods have shown a strong desire to possess you. The dungeon will close soon. Several gods have shown a desire to speak with you. The sacred essence of the serpent that encircles the world mocks the belated gods and stars. The hero is still sitting on the ground. The sacred essence of the serpent that encircles the world asks you not to forget who first showed interest in you. Chunyi and his henchmen were hiding behind the rocks. The guy bared his teeth and thought that the hero was his. The blonde grinned and decided that the brunette was too exhausted to even stand up. He ordered the players to attack. They ran. The crowd of people approached the hero sitting on the ground. Behind him, the world turned scarlet. Chunyi looked at him in surprise. Changsun smiled. The blonde was horrified. Could he really be laughing? The unknown sacred essence burst into laughter because of the upcoming fun. The hero rose to his feet. A sound was heard. The Chunyi player and everyone nearby were trapped. The blonde looked forward in shock. The other players were scared. The guy was terrified. He shouted what it meant. The brunette turned to him and smiled. Changsun smirked and replied that he had miscalculated badly. All the guys ran to attack the protagonist on Chunyi's orders. The protagonist looked at the guys with disdain, holding a blade. The guy looked at them angrily through his bangs. He immediately began to cut the guys with his blade. He ducked and ran forward through the people who were trying to block him. A notification that a surprise quest had been created to escape the trap. The crowd of guys pointed their weapons at Changsun. The sacred essence said that it was watching the surprise quest with interest. The lightsaber slashes attacked the Chunyi guys. The protagonist flew to attack straight at Chunyi. The brunette looked at his enemy with disdain. The players came face to face with blades. The white-haired guy was horrified by such an attack. Chunyi leaned back in horror when his body was pierced. Changsun looked ahead with a malicious smile. He saw how his enemy bared his teeth in pain. The main character destroyed a stone mountain with his attack. Chunyi tried to run away from his enemy, covering himself with the guys. They were immediately attacked by Changsun's lightsaber. Chunyi watched what was happening in horror and realized that his enemy was too strong and he needed more power. A military man watched the ongoing battle from above. Heseong frowned at the battle and realized that, as he thought, the gods had chosen Chunyi, whose original target was Changsun. Chunyi angrily waved his arms after the light attack. Heseong realized that Chunyi was just a pitiful pawn in the training of the protagonist. The military man remembered with horror his thorny path in the past. A tattoo appeared on the arm of the sarcastic Chunyi. He killed one player and received his life force under the contract. Streams of purple aura fluttered in the wind. Under the contract, he received his life force unsuccessfully. The guy realized with horror what was happening. The main character was immediately flying towards him with a sword. Red lightning discharges emitted from his menacing silhouette. He immediately delivered a light attack to his enemy. Chunyi opened his mouth wide from the sword strike. Changsun looked at his victim arrogantly. He immediately cut off his hand and blood splashed. The guy immediately fell to the ground. He howled in pain, holding his wound. He saw another player being absorbed by a dark aura. The guy watched in horror as these dark auras reached out to him. Streams of dark aura were absorbed into the protagonist, and for some unknown reason, life force was leaving for another person. Chunyi watched in surprise and did not understand how this was possible. The brunette looked at his victim arrogantly and said his name, knowing that he had heard his name somewhere before. Changsun looked at Chunyi with disdain. The guy bared his teeth in pain and realized that he was recognized. The protagonist touched his chin and realized that nothing came to mind. Chunyi's eyes widened in shock. He immediately began to scream furiously about how the guy could not remember him, because it was because of him that he was kicked out of the esports club. Suddenly, the brunette was dumbfounded. He looked away with disdain and said that now he remembered. He recalled how he talked to this guy in the hallway. He remembered how Chunyi tearfully complained to him then. The protagonist began to walk towards the guy and said that he was the one who complained about being kicked out of the club and, what's more, shed tears in such an ugly manner. The brunette contemptuously curled his lips, noting that this guy was still as disgusting as he was then and now. Chunyi bared his teeth and became embittered from what he heard. He immediately took out his blade and ran towards Changsun. He was angry that such words were said about him because he was no longer who he was before. The sacred essence said that he looked at this pathetic creature without interest. The protagonist looked down on this guy. Changsun continued to look down on the pathetic guy. Chunyi, with tears in his eyes and confusion, did not want such a fate for himself. Many tears filled his eyes, and he realized that he had become his extra again. Notification that the sudden quest to escape from the trap had failed. The brunette immediately swung his blade. Chunyi opened his mouth in horror and screamed. Tears filled his eyes. He remembered watching the jubilant team of the winner of the competition. At that moment, the leader of the Changsun team was raising the cup. Chunyi remembered how he followed the protagonist with a bat chasing him. He understood that if he had not envied him and had not followed him, then he would not have been stuck in the gate. A red beam of light flashed past Chunyi's head, and everything that happened must be punished. Chunyi was lying on the ground with a bloody neck and a furious look. The punishment was death. The main character stretched out his hand with a blade, and the Chunyi player died. A purple aura emanated from Chunyi's dead body. According to the seal contract, the remaining life energy will be transferred to the owner. A powerful energy aura began to emanate from his body. The guys watched this and were shocked that his body was spewing out a huge amount of energy. I noticed that the energy reserves were overflowing. This entire energy was reaching out to the main character, and it would take some time to fully absorb it. All the guys watched in shock as Changsun was able to completely absorb this aura. This aura accumulated in the form of a circle on his neck. It was a magic circle that sucked in streams of aura. The brunette was drawing on the girl's hand with a knife at that moment. He explained that he had improved her seal, and now she was the owner just like Chunyi. It was a tattoo of an owl on her hand along with a magic circle. He said that if this energy was directed towards her, she would not be able to absorb it and she could die. It was a glowing magic circle, a hieroglyph. The guy added that that's why he had applied the runes of transition nearby, and thanks to it, all the power would flow to him. This magic circle began to suck in the aura. The constellation of the snake, which wrapped around the entire world, advised him to absorb the incoming energy more slowly since it was very different from his. This constellation said that excessive greed would not lead to anything good and also claimed that it was better to refuse some of the energy if necessary. Powerful streams of energy dug into the neck of the main character. The constellation was surprised that he was able to use seals of such a level and praised him for the idea of using a low-level rune to transmit energy from the owner to him. Changsun absorbed the dark aura through gnashing of teeth. He felt as if he had taken an elixir that had been brewing for hundreds of years, but the quality left much to be desired. Notification that the constellation admitted that watching the training was very fun and, as expected, the constellation conveyed its congratulations to him. Brunette held his blade. He was aware that he was being tested and he was trying to figure out who did it. The constellation was thinking about what kind of reward should be given to him for the wonderful show he had given. The decision was made. The award was going to be announced in the coming seconds. All the people began to watch in horror as the dark aura engulfed them. Streams, auras began to lift people's bodies, the air, and the countdown was underway. Brunette watched the process intently. He saw how the bodies of people were pierced and lifted into the air. He had a choice in front of him, yes or no. Heseong was watching him, behind the stone. He watched the processes with a daze and understood that if they were not satisfied with the result of Changsun, they would simply finish off everyone to the last one. The brunette looked away with contempt. The main character watched this with empty eyes. The military man realized that the guy decided to take all the human lives. He bared his teeth in horror and realized that there was no point in refusing the gift of the gods and there was nothing to even think about. However, the guy decided to press the no button. He poked the no button with a sad look and the countdown was interrupted. Yellow and red aura emitted in space. The constellation was very puzzled by his decision and said that he needed a large amount of energy, which it wanted to give him. The constellation also claimed that human lives were very useful material for creating magical energy. The protagonist looked ahead and stated that he did not trust those who sat at the top and were afraid of even their name being revealed. Heseong peeked out from behind the rocks and praised the guy. It was a red rift in the space of the yellow aura. The constellation tilted its head in confusion and belatedly noticed that their true names were hidden and chuckled slightly. A shining notification appeared that this constellation was revealing its hidden sacred name. In the same space, the constellation said that it was a demon following the abyss and looked at him with a sly smile. The protagonist looked ahead in shock, realizing that it was Mephistopheles. The brunette immediately closed his eyes in disgust. The constellation of the demon pursuing the abyss asked if he knew it. The guy realized that he had screwed up and replied that he did not know, because he was simply surprised that his sacred name had the word demon. A bright light in the dark space and the name Mephistopheles. He recalled that it was a black demon with shining vases. He knew that among demons, Mephistopheles was one of the most terrifying creatures and even Tiamat came in status. The guy also heard that they did not want to reveal their essence to the outside world, because they preferred solitude. The brunette bared his teeth in anger. This constellation doubted that this was the only reason for his surprise, but also added that he did not care. Changsun did not understand how someone like such a demon could be here. The constellation demon pursuing the abyss wanted him to finally agree with the reason for his decision. The protagonist suddenly froze and was dumbfounded. Another constellation, Blessed Hunting Season, expressed dissatisfaction towards the demon pursuing the abyss to stop bothering his property. The protagonist looked away sarcastically. He realized it was Pilbasac because he couldn't hear anything from her, and it seemed to him that she was already on her way, but now she was butting heads with a demon that even her mother would be afraid of. The protagonist held his blade proudly, looking away. A notice that the dungeon would soon close, he was asked to beware of sudden jolts. The brunette looked away with disdain when he heard the girl's appeal. A brown-haired girl was running towards him from afar. Notification that the capture rune had successfully attracted attention to the target. The brunette stunned her way through the hypnotized people and asked the guy how she could find him later. Changsun waved his hand, showing a wooden blade. The girl immediately caught the wooden knife in her hands. He extended his index finger and said that if she followed the address engraved on the handle of this knife, she would be able to completely remove the seal. He stared at the girl and said that such things were beyond his power, so maybe they would meet again someday. The girl tried to get to the guy who should have disappeared. She covered her face and opened her mouth from the bright light. Notification that the dungeon was completely destroyed. Notification that all participants did a great job. The girl looked ahead with tired eyes as they searched for survivors. She looked over her hand in shock and realized that it was not a flash. She was in the city and the media and journalists were coming towards them. They immediately started asking people questions. The brunette looked ahead in shock when she was asked if everything was okay with her. Her mom and dad immediately ran to her from afar. They hugged each other tearfully, and she realized that she had survived. Tears began to appear in her eyes, and she tried to understand where Changsun was. She began to make her way through the black silhouettes and looked for the guy. She saw how people cried and hugged with happiness, realizing that there was no guy here. She looked ahead sadly, holding the blade. The main character was sitting under a huge moon at night. He smiled sarcastically under his hood. The constellation of the snake, wrapping around the whole world, said that she preferred a more energetic lifestyle, but peacefully observing the night sky was also not bad. The demon, pursuing the abyss, was still waiting for his answer. The brunette looked at the starry sky with trepidation. He understood for the old man, even if this outcome did not satisfy his expectations, he could still return home. The boy sat on the bridge and watched the city at night. The brunette's foot stepped on the ground. The divine being, the time of hunting, expressed extreme hostility towards the deities who were interested in him. At dawn in the city, Changsun walked along the highway. The divine being, the snake that coiled around the whole world, laughed, licking its tongue. The brunette walked forward under the hood. The divine being, the great devil who chased the abyss, ignored the hostility and waited for his answer. The bright rays of the sun illuminated the silhouette of Changsun. The time of hunting asked him to listen to it. The bright rays of the sun illuminated the morning city. The divine being, the great devil who chased the abyss, waited for his answer. The hooded brunette smirked slightly and realized that he thought he would succeed if he attracted 2 or 3 divine beings, but because he had trained quite well, many of them were interested. He thought that this must be the first time that all these gods and stars were attracted. A quest scenario appeared, choosing a god of protection. The protagonist walked along the sidewalk in the tunnel. A card with the choice of a star of protection. Players could choose gods of protection who would grant them blessings and powers, and he was asked to choose from their suggestions, to choose a god who would stay with him until the end. Hunting Time declared that it would be the best choice since it had excellent hunting skills and skill with a dagger. The protagonist put his hands in his pocket and walked along the tunnel. A divine being promised him the role of the first arrow. The rays of the sun penetrated into the dark space of the bridge. The snake that coiled around the world suggested that it was more suitable for him because of his character, as it was cunning and pursued power. The divine being promised him the role of a wise enlightened one. The bright light of the sun illuminated the silhouette of the brunette. The great devil who chased the abyss was quietly waiting for his answer. The divine being promised him the role of the last observer. Changsun looked puzzled. He understood that the most useful of all of them would be Pabilsag, Jormungand, and Mephistopheles. He was about to come out from behind the corner under the color of the sun. He understood that the rest of the constellations were useless and not equal to these 3. 4 minutes passed. The protagonist frowned under his hood and remembered one constellation. He looked ahead sadly, when the divine being owl piercing the twilight was very interested in him. The guy looked ahead with a tired look and remembered Minerva, who was the real owner of the seal and who, under the statement, possessed Mephisto. He imagined a girl with a huge sharp spear and shield. He understood that this was a god who was always fighting for justice, who was interested in him. The guy frowned ahead and understood that he most likely captured her attention when he overcame the temptation of the seal and saved the others. Thanks to this, the scale that was tilted towards evil found its balance. The scale of righteousness and evil, righteousness 40%, evil 60%. The main character walked along the bridge under the rays of the sun. All the constellations were waiting for his answer. 9 gods of tension were waiting for him to choose a defense star. When he does not have a defense star, he does not receive any blessings or powers, which automatically makes him weaker compared to players of the same level, so he was asked to choose as quickly as possible. Changsun suddenly stopped when the time was up. The brunette put his hands in his pocket and looked up when he was informed that he currently did not have a defense star. He took off his hood and frowned slightly. A new achievement emerged, that he was a charming man, having refused all the offers of the gods. He looked at the tall building. The notice that a number of gods were interested in him made him angry and sick of his endless greed. His fame increased and his achievements were estimated at 100,000 karma. He realized that it would be heavier than when he was in the dungeon. This was the tallest building in the city, the WPCFF Association, the World Player Council. He recalled various footage from the past, where there were rifts and people on the battlefield. This association was more famous for being an organization under the Unsecurity Management Bureau. It was made to effectively manage the dungeons and gates that suddenly appeared decades ago, which fundamentally changed the ecosystem of the Earth. This association building absorbed the rays of the morning sun. This association had great power, such as transnational status, as well as the power of investigation. Of course, this concerned the superiors who managed the association. The girl ran with the phone to the guy in front of the screens. The guy immediately started clicking on the keyboard, realizing that this was the work of the damn press, framing them. A bunch of notifications from the press started to pop up that it was the dungeon breakout that had been in the spotlight for the past 5 days, which ended up being closed. There was also a message that the association staff said that this problem arose when they were taking extreme precautions, and it was a small problem. The girl slammed her fist on the table and said that she had suffered for 5 days as the person in charge on the spot. The brunette Yun, being a third-class association agent, looked forward angrily. She talked about evacuating the residents, setting up a line of defense with the police and army, and ended up making preparations to support other countries in emergency situations, grabbing the leader by the collar, and received nothing in return. Her assistant coolly looked forward and asked her to look at the bottom article. They saw an article by a man in veil with an L on it. The girl touched her head with a tired expression and asked the assistant where he thought it leaked from. The guy replied that smoking was not allowed in the room. Yun clenched her fist in anger and asked the guy if he wanted to get punched in the face. The brunette crossed her arms and sat on the table, stating that she told him to carefully block all outside contact. The guy replied that it was not as easy as it sounded and the girl should have known that. The guy rested his head on his hand and stated that fortunately, the press only saw it as a headline and they did not pay much attention to the L letters because a newbie just came in, locked a 2-star dungeon by himself and disappeared without a trace, thinking that no one would believe it. Yun lit a cigarette and looked at the ceiling. She wondered about the civilian, could the guy be a demon? The girl frowned sadly and said that they needed to contact him as soon as possible before the clans, and no matter how they looked for him, they couldn't find him. The brunette looked around in shock when they shouted that they found the guy. She immediately spat out her cigarette and asked where the guy was. Her eyes widened when she was told that the guy was at home. They looked at the guy running into the office when he added that the guy was definitely at home. At this time, the protagonist went home and took off his shoes. At this time, food was cooking on the stove. His mother looked at her son and asked him if he had time to eat. Suddenly, she was surprised. She saw that her son was hiding deep in his jacket and had his hands in his pocket. She tried to understand why he looked so awful. The brunette was sniffing the aroma of food and realized that for the first time in a long time he could smell his mother's delicious food and his consciousness was fading because of this aroma. His dog was touching his leg with its paw. Changsun picked up the dog and it began to lick him. He saw that the dog was happy to see him too, but he asked her to stop licking him. Mom replied that the dish was already ready, looking at her son. He looked back at his mother while the dog was licking him. She asked him to take a shower while she set the table. The brunette stroked his dog, realizing that he was finally home after so many long years and was able to return. A pile of food and snacks stood on the table. The whole family was having dinner at the table. The protagonist looked down and realized that it was she who had been avoiding clinging. His brother and sister closed their eyes and said that they were leaving. Changsun looked away with disdain and realized that since his father's family owned some sort of conglomerate, His father had inherited a large hospital, and his mother's family consisted of famous scholars who either worked in the legal industry or as diplomats. His mother watched the older children leave and asked them if they would be out late again tonight. The eldest son replied that he had an operation that evening, so he might be a little late. Changsun realized that following in his father's footsteps, his older brother went into medical school and his older sister was into music and had won many awards in music competitions. The older children left through the door, and the older sister stated that she was not sure she would be able to come back early since she had a concert in the countryside tonight. Compared to them, the boy had always strived for victories since childhood and was obsessed with games and was always accepted as an outsider. The brunette looked down with a sad expression and knew that, being the youngest of them, he returned after a few days and looked very unkempt, and he did not understand why they were not at all excited. He immediately tried a spoonful of rice. At this moment, he thought that they wanted to preserve good memories, and apparently he did not feel anything in this house. His father slammed his chopsticks on the table and asked his son how long he was going to remain silent. Changsun sat with a sad expression and remained silent. His mother looked worriedly at his father, who told her not to interfere. His father looked worriedly at his son and asked him about when the gate was opened. Did he know that his mother had fainted and they were looking for him, and people also said that he might have been carried into the gate. The protagonist chewed his food with a sad expression at this time. His father added that, worried that he was in the emergency room, his older brother called every hospital in Korea, and his older sister helped his mother look for him everywhere and was unable to go abroad. His father got up from the table and said menacingly that Changsun looked like a poor guy, showed up a couple of days later and just ate in silence. The brunette sat with an offended look when he was asked if he was still able to eat. His father menacingly pointed his finger to the side and said that even animals do not behave like that, and told him that if he was going to continue living like this, then he should leave home and stop causing problems for his mother, brother, and sister. The father bared his teeth angrily when his wife asked her husband to stop, because most likely their son behaved like this because he was ashamed of what happened, and she asked Changsun to say something because his father was very worried. His father immediately grabbed his suitcase. He quickly headed to work. With tears in his eyes, he walked without looking back. The brunette watched from the side. The door to the house slammed shut. The protagonist sat with his hands folded. His mother was very upset and said that her son should have understood everything, that his father said whatever came into his head when he was angry and asked him not to take it to heart. The main character also looked upset and agreed with his mother's request. The main character looked closely at his mother. He saw how she curled her lips and lowered her eyebrows and noticed the wrinkles on her face. The guy suddenly became sad, realizing that he had been so careless. He remembered how he sat at the computer when his whole family was watching him. He was just waiting for his family to worry about him, but he was thinking about somehow getting closer to them himself. A pile of food stood on the table. Mom asked Changsun to rest in his room. His mother's eyes widened in alarm when he apologized to her and asked him to repeat himself. The mother walked up to her son who was sitting on a chair. He apologized to her again and said that he would be more careful. Changsun went into his room and saw a mess. He immediately started picking up the trash, realizing that he had been living in such a pigsty, and it was really serious. Suddenly, he looked back. He saw a dog happily wagging its tail. He immediately hugged the puppy and thought about how he could untangle this mess. The clear sunny weather stood above the building, and he wanted to start with cleaning. A bunch of cars were driving on the highway. A sports yellow car was speeding along the road. The agent's assistant was shocked that it was a new model, of which there were only 100 models in the country, and asked her how she got this car. The girl was driving while her assistant was horrified. He wondered what was more important, where did she get the money with their salary? The girl said with a sly grin that she had worked a lot under the contract. She smoked a cigarette while driving and thought about how she could see what Elle looked like as soon as possible. At this time, the protagonist was lying on the bed in a clean room. He was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. The hunting time deity was interested in what he was going to do next, and she addressed him, saying that she would be able to help him improve his hunting techniques. The snake deity that coiled around the world told him that rest was also important. He remembered how his older brother and sister left home, so he remembered the sad looks of his parents. Changsun looked at the ceiling with a sad look. He immediately sat down and thought about how he urgently needed to show that he had changed, that he no longer liked to drink and hang on others' necks, that he was already an adult capable of doing what he should. He furrowed his brows and looked up, realizing that if he became a player, he would be sure that his family would slowly open up to him. He immediately lay down and pulled himself up to the puppy, realizing that this was a much better start than he expected, and he felt like he would be able to start the second plan sooner than he thought. The protagonist lay on his side and smirked, realizing that this ruler of the abyss would be here. He remembered standing before the god and asking who he was supposed to deal with first. Venado smirked maliciously and stated that it was obvious that it was the ruler living in his world. The protagonist stared at the rulers and asked who they were. Venados brought his hands to his face in glee and noted that they were quite familiar with him. After all, he was a tiger trapped in deprivation. The protagonist bared his teeth in glee. He lay with that evil grin next to the puppy. He imagined how people stood on the pillars and were illuminated by a yellow aura, realizing that it was one of his sworn enemies who was at the divine trial. He remembered the malicious grin from under the hood of that guy and still clearly remembered how he laughed heartily in front of him. He remembered that his worst enemy in a cape looked at the cheering crowd and wanted to get to him, realizing that it would not be so easy because the guy was cunning. Changsun knew that the guy was cruel like a tiger and caught everything on the fly, and also had many subordinates. In his phone, there was a tab with the tiger emblem. The white tiger was always next to him when they smiled and recruited into the clan. He carefully looked at this emblem and thought of the white tiger clan. Lights lit up on the empty street of the night city. He realized that as the gates began to open, a large number of gods and stars began to appear on the ground, and as a result, groups appeared that received blessings and baptism. He imagined the logo of the White Tiger clan. The guy realized that the ruler of the abyss was the patron of the White Tiger clan, and he was doing badly with the name. Just because he was a white tiger, he called his followers white tigers. The protagonist looked at his phone indifferently and realized that this was a huge clan, ranked first in Korea, and they were really huge. He saw that there was a recruitment for the clan, which would be recruiting players in a month. The brunette grinned maliciously, realizing that now he did not have the strength to start a war, so he wanted to start by slowly cutting off a piece from the very bottom so that no one would notice. He realized that it was necessary to finish all the preparations in a month at any cost. Bright sunbeams illuminated the tall building. Mom asked Changsun where he went. The guy answered that he would go to the park near the river and said that he would be back soon, so he asked her not to worry. It was a forested mountain. Mom noted that it was quite far. The protagonist arrived by taxi to an empty road. He looked at the dense forest. He immediately began to walk forward. The brunette walked under the hood and understood that no matter what, he should not be interrupted while he was doing it. Neither people nor animals should be disturbed, because not the slightest miscalculation was allowed. The guy ran past a wooden toilet. He looked at his rumbling stomach and realized that he probably ate too much delicious food after hunger. His stomach was not very good. He immediately surrounded the glowing core with his hand and understood that he could fix everything, as he did in the dungeon. The protagonist looked puzzled. He decided to take off his hood and go to the toilet, realizing that it would be better to do it like normal people, because his body would be in shock that he had not used the toilet for so long. Unpleasant sounds were heard from the toilet. Then he stood in a proud pose and realized that now he could continue. The guy immediately rushed to run on an adventure. It was a rocky area with trees. He stood in the depths of the forest and thought that this was enough. He began to swing the blade and let the blood flow from his hand. Drops of blood fell on the trees. A blue status window appeared and he used the stealth rune. Then this status window began to disappear. Changsun undressed and folded his clothes, realizing that they needed to be saved. The naked brunette swung his arms and was about to open the inventory. A blue funnel of his things was spinning around him. There was a bone spear carved from the ribs of a Bengal mountain goat, 13 pieces. There was also a small fire salamander skull shield, 21 pieces. There was also a poisonous mamba fang, burnt Bengal tiger claws, and an ice poisonous ice kite beak. All of these items were floating around the funnel protagonist. He then decided to eat the plague spider's poison glands. The naked guy raised his hand above his head, emitting a blue aura. He looked up and remembered how he stood in front of the priests in outer space. Changsun realized that there was nothing better than using poison as an arsonist to light a large bonfire, because the pure fire energy accumulated in his body was mainly known for repelling poison. He imagined an old man with ornaments on his head and realized that it destroyed evil, since it was a purifying fire that specialized in purification. He remembered how one ruler also sent streams of fire down near himself. That elder said, once foreign substances trying to harm the body are found, they will inevitably be burned to ashes, and the stronger these substances are, the stronger the fire will be. The protagonist looked ahead in space when he was told that only then will the fire become the fire of the 8 trigrams. The elder looked at him through his bangs and said, when the fire of the 8 trigrams ignites, all foreign substances will be purified, and there was no better way to purify the body than this. The brunette realized that since he had enough fire, he could start with the heart. A green stream of aura penetrated his body. He bared his teeth, feeling his body being pierced by aura. The blood mamba's poison fang hit his heart and the poison spread quickly. A notification that there was a low-level poison resistance that was activated and the effects were not enough. The protagonist screamed in horror as his body began to mutate. A notice that he urgently needed to get rid of the blood mamba's poison fang and begin detoxification. A notice that he had completely absorbed the blood mamba's poison fang and opened the hidden part. Changsun bared his teeth angrily as he looked at his hand. A notice that he had acquired the snake venom gene and could now produce some blood mamba venom. He had earned 50,000 karma points and was in critical condition. Another beam of green aura pierced his body. The burnt claws of the Bengal tiger had penetrated his liver and intestines. The hunting time deity was worried and wanted to know what he was doing, as it was asking if he had any item that could help in this situation. The snake that coiled around the world exclaimed in surprise after he opened the hidden part, and it added that he definitely had some aces up his sleeve and was interested in what would happen next. The great demon chasing the abyss was waiting for his answer. The protagonist, who had been mutated, bared his teeth fiercely. The owl piercing the dim light was rooting for him. A green stream of aura spread out from his body in all directions. The sting of the underground scorpion had penetrated his spleen, and he was about to die. Changsun was still sucking in the spider glands. The poison glands of the plague spider had penetrated his lungs, and he opened the hidden part. The protagonist immediately began to transform into a new appearance. A notice that all of his 5 major organs were filled with poison, and they were in conflict with each other. His poison status had greatly increased. The protagonist, in black form, opened his mouth. In black form of a monster, he was spinning in a green aura. Low-level resistance, poison was activated and was ineffective. He opened the lot wide, and a bright light lit up there. A red notification popped up that he urgently needed treatment, otherwise he would die. A notification that immediate detoxification was needed, and if the poisoning lasted, his body would be irreversibly damaged. A puff of fire appeared from the protagonist's mouth, a notification that his body was completely paralyzed. Mana was leaving for the fire dormant inside him. It was a funnel of fire core. The guy spewed a powerful flurry of fire from his mouth. His shell began to crumble and the fire awakened. His entire body began to incinerate, surrounded by fire because the fire began to rage. He opened the hidden part. Huge fiery explosions grew throughout the entire space. He raised his hand through the fire. He was congratulated for successfully lighting the legendary ancient sacred fire that had been forgotten. He could now use this fire. Consecutive notifications appeared that he had begun to recover and cleanse himself of poisons. A notification that all energy paths and blood had been purified, as well as the meridian paths. The protagonist stood in the raging fire, raising his hands. All his veins had been purified and his magical power organs had been restored. He had acquired the magical power of the brazier and mastered the attribute of fire and poison. The brunette smiled maliciously when the achievement notification popped up. Phoenix rising from the ashes, reward plus 15 to all stats, constant purification of the trait immunity to 10 poisons. The brunette was glad that he had finally gained immunity to poisons. He was about to poke his finger at the system window to open it. The protagonist's card with the divine name light of the gods appeared. He was also the patron of the Rune Keeper class. He also had a lot of acquired effects and unique parts. Changsun smiled wickedly through his bangs and understood that he needed to get a weapon. It was a huge residential building where the main character lived. who was visited. The sun's rays illuminated the black building when the agents were asked to enter. Ian stared ahead while the assistant was dumbfounded. They answered that they thought that the association really lived up to its name because it was very slow. The brunette watched as the big guy talked to Changson's mother. The big guy replied that the people from the association came faster than he thought because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. She saw how the big blonde guy pointed his finger at his colleague. The brunette was the head of the HR department of the Sword of Wisdom clan named Wu Youngjun. The big blonde guy was the second leader of the White Tiger clan squad named Seo Youngkwon. The brunette bared her teeth in displeasure and frowned, realizing that she had not been careful enough. They were transported to the Sungsu district, a shoemaker's alley where people were walking. Cheese was stretched along the nugget stick. The protagonist ate these nuggets from the box, realizing that filling oneself with magical power was in no way comparable to filling oneself with food. He stared ahead and realized that because he had heard that the devil of the light of the gods was the king of weapons. He remembered standing in front of Thanatos, who told him that in that case, he would need a large selection of weapons when he returned, and then he would need a blacksmith who would satisfy all his needs. The brunette frowned at the ruler and asked him if such a person existed. Thanatos looked at the guy sarcastically and replied that there was. The protagonist chewed his food when he was asked from the side to respond to look at their goods. The brunette walked up to the closed shop when he was told that they had been closed for 5 years. A large padlock was closed with chains. Changsun realized that it had been 5 years since they had been closed. He put his hands in his pocket and stood in front of the closed stall. He suddenly decided to look through the door. He saw that white smoke was coming from that padlock. For him, it smelled like sacred fire, which meant that someone had used a good brazier. The deity of hunting time was starting to get interested and, according to her, the smell of good steel was coming from inside. This powerful lock was thinning out white smoke from itself, and the guy realized that they definitely did not use a brazier inside. He immediately crumbled this lock. Then he lifted the door. He went inside and looked around, noticing many weapons. The deity of hunting time responded well to the aromatic smell of metal. With his hands in his pocket, he walked through the garage. The deity of hunting time said that it was beautiful and there is no place on earth more worthy of being called paradise than this. The protagonist looked ahead slightly worried. Hunting time screamed in amazement. He saw a shiny and rusty blade. Hunting time criticized him for looking at this strange weapon instead of other good quality weapons. He picked up the old blade and examined it. Hunting time asked him to quickly throw away this strange thing and go look at another weapon. The brunette stared at the rusty sword. Suddenly, he looked back when he was called. He saw a man with a dog. The brunette stared at them. He was a mulatto with long hair and glasses, and Changsun thought he was blind. The guy's mother held out sliced apples. The brunette looked at the guests with trepidation and said that she had prepared some fruits. The two leaders of different clans were slightly surprised. The brunette and her assistant were shocked that she was graceful. Yan was displeased and angry when the guys heard about the recruits who were supposedly worth their weight in gold. Youngkwon sarcastically adjusted his mustache and said that from the squad leaders to the department head, was there any point? The agent looked at the guests with awe and realized that it was strange, because these were not the people who came in person to recruit a newbie. Ian replied that it was different if they were talking about a super newbie. She imagined how the leader of the White Tiger clan was looked at with surprise. The girl realized that the face of the White Tiger clan, which was the strongest in Korea, was the leader of the Youngkwon squad. The guy wore a fake mustache because he thought that all strong warriors wore mustaches. Youngjun was holding a black book at this time. Ian understood that this was a 5-star sword clan, which started as a branch of a large corporation, and a 5-star group quickly grew into a huge clan and their head of the personnel department, Youngjun. So the agent remembered Wu Hyabin, who was one of the survivors in the gate this time. The brunette frowned deeply, realizing that this was all for a simple super rookie. She knew that there was definitely something in Changsun. Ian was even angrier, realizing that Changsun was just one person. The agent was sure that the others would make sure that the others couldn't recruit him if they couldn't. The girl sat opposite the big guy and Changsun's mother. The agent turned to the leader of the White Tiger and asked him what brought them here if they were so busy. Youngkwon replied that if he didn't do it, people would think that he was a freeloader. They leaned towards each other angrily and looked into each other's eyes. The blonde asked the agent if she was going to get in their way. Ian asked her not to forget them, that they were the first ones to start bothering them by stealing their secrets. They looked into each other's eyes furiously. Yunkwon asked the agent if they had abused their power. The girl replied that it was most likely the White Tiger clan that was interfering with the government. Changsun's mother became sad and asked them if they had both come to recruit her son. The boys looked at their mother in shock and replied that it was exactly like that. The protagonist's mother sat idly by while they tried to persuade her. She closed her eyes and said that she heard them. She immediately looked at the people and said that her youngest son would be deciding for himself here, so she didn't think they should talk to her because she wanted to ask them something. The boys looked at her in shock. She frowned slightly and said that they had been told that their son had spent the last 5 days in the Jamsil dungeon and she wanted to know the details of what had happened. An old sign hung above the stall. The brunette sat opposite the blacksmith, who asked him if he wanted to make a weapon. Yaya, wearing glasses, said that the guy was funny because he asked to make his weapon, even when he saw what state he was in now and tried to understand where such trust came from. The deity, Hunting Time, nodding furiously, said that the blind man's words were true. Also, this Hunting Time added that most likely all these excellent weapons were not made by him. The protagonist stared ahead. The snake that wraps around the world said that she was damn noisy and asked her to just shut up and watch. Iya took his dog and went to the exit. He said that if Changsun came here to laugh at him, then it was enough, because this forge had been closed for a long time. The brunette looked closely through his bangs and noted, although he said so to Iya, but wondered if the brazier was working now. The blacksmith held the guide dog tightly when Changsun noticed the fresh calluses on his hands. The mulatto was about to look back, thinking that the guy was talking nonsense. The main character frowned at the dog and noted that the blacksmith was having some financial difficulties and at least he shouldn't let his friend, who became his eyes, go hungry. Iya was slightly puzzled by your back. The brunette stared at him and said that he would give him 10 million won for each request, and when everything was over, he would get another 5 million won on top regardless of the quality. He noted that if the quality did meet all expectations, he would give him a decent bonus. Iya was standing next to the dog when he was asked for his account number. A notification came to the blacksmith that his account had been replenished by 10 million won. Iya stared at his phone. The protagonist stared through his bangs and stated that it was an advance payment, not a prepayment, and asked him if it was enough. The blacksmith said with a sad expression that he could have had more. Changsun was slightly surprised. The blacksmith was holding a guide dog and stated that he needed another 5 million to pay the rent he owed. The protagonist immediately grabbed his phone. The blacksmith received a new notification that his account had been topped up by another 5 million won. The mulatto looked to the side, wondering what the guy wanted from him. Iya looked away in confusion. Changsun looked at the blacksmith coolly and asked him to give him his promise. The protagonist casually crossed his legs and asked the blacksmith to promise that he would only work for him when taking his money and asked him to call him boss. The protagonist sat across from the blacksmith. Iya realized that Changsun wanted a 5-meter whip, a long collapsible spear, 5 large axes and 1 small hand axe, 4 different types of swords, and a shield, thinking that was all. The brunette noted that there was also a bow and some arrows, since he was also thinking about armor in the future. The main character went into his phone and added another 100 million won to Iya's bank when he said that he couldn't do it. Changsun stated what kind of materials they were and asked him to tell him if he needed more, and also asked him not to say words like he couldn't do it because the contract would require him to pay 3 times what he received if he broke it. The mulatto was angry that he was in such a situation. Changsun looked at the blacksmith and said that he often heard this. Rays of light fell on the blacksmith through the window. He asked Changsun why he trusted him to do this since they met for the first time. The protagonist leaned back in his chair and stated that it was true, and what's more, no one had the huge disadvantage of being blind. The protagonist looked ahead with disdain and wondered if Iya thought that the one who took the orders didn't have to ask questions of the one who ordered it. He explained that the blacksmith made the items and he paid the money, and he thought that was what a good contract looked like. The mulatto with glasses looked ahead and said that he would take his order, but it was too difficult to do everything and there wasn't enough time. He explained that he hadn't worked with iron for a long time, so he needed to get used to it again, and everything he asked to do was quite difficult to do and it would take him a long time to figure out how to do it. The blacksmith looked ahead with concern and added that there was another big problem. The protagonist asked with displeasure what the problem was. He presented his fire hammer and stated that he needed a special hammer to work his brazier, but he didn't have one. The brunette frowned slightly and asked about who took Yaya's hammer. The blacksmith was slightly horrified, saying that his older brother and his father's former apprentice stole the hammer, and after his father died, he joined a large clan and stole the hammer that his father used. The brunette put his hand on the chair and noted that this was not foresight and asked about where his brother joined. Yaya slightly frowned and said that it was Higoff. The protagonist was slightly upset. The blacksmith opened his mouth wide and said that they were one of the top 10 clans. The brunette stood up and leaned slightly, saying that he would get this sword for him and asked about this clan place. Yaya was worried, saying that it was extremely dangerous. Changsun looked away and replied that it did not matter because he also just had to take care of everyone there so that there was no evidence left. The blacksmith opened his mouth in shock, realizing that this was it, and he continued to feel drawn to this guy. He saw Changsun's grim grin, but he did not know the reason that this guy was the boss, and he felt that he could do it. The guys stood opposite each other. The blacksmith replied that this place was in Seoul, Junggyeonggu, Manhwa Mountain. They were transported to this place where it was already night. The columns on the stone fortress stood in a row. Changsun jumped on them nimbly. He saw a group of people walking into the cave. He realized that the blacksmith's elder brother was in this clan, and there was only one reason why they would recruit Jin Diwen, this scoundrel. He watched the scene closely. I realized that in order to open the tomb, Higoff had long been known to want to secretly clear the dungeon, arranged like a tomb. He saw armed guards guarding the entrance to the cave. He knew that this place was noticed, and the elder brother Yaya, in order to open the last room in the tomb, thought it was shaped like a castle. He realized that there was most likely a hidden part, and they recruited him because they could not find it. The guy looked ahead sullenly and tried to figure out what kind of place it was if it was so difficult to find, and there must be good items inside. He looked at the moon and thought that it was around 8:40 p.m. He started texting his mother to calm her down. He sat on his phone and wrote that he would have dinner on the way home. He went to the browser and was going to search about the Hyoff clan. He came across an article that said that this clan was closely related to a brutal criminal with a black silhouette. He frowned as he scrolled through his phone and realized that they were just a pawn. Changsun knew that even if he killed them all, it would not be a big deal. He looked to the side when he saw a message from the deities pop up. The owl piercing the dim light was pleased with his sense of justice and nodded. He received the special bonus of the unbending spirit. The message that it was unbending spirit and blessing type, effect, mind immunity, iron will. The protagonist squinted and looked to the side. He thought that there must have been a misunderstanding, but if they were going to give him bonuses, it would be cool if it was the recognizing eyes or the blade and dagger of the goddess. Changsun took out a mask from his jacket. System notification. The hunting time deity is happy because it looks like an interesting battle is brewing. The deity, the snake that wraps around the world, is looking forward to his battle with the clan. Changsun thought that he should hide his identity first. A blue glow emanated from the smiling mask. System notification. Laughing Hao mask, a defense item, obstacle to recognition. The protagonist held daggers in his hands, saying that although he did not want to kill them quickly. System notification. He put on the Laughing Hao mask. He took out daggers from the feathers of the ice kite. Changsun waved his hand, throwing daggers. The fighter looked up. The dagger pierced his head. His face was frozen by the ice dagger. The daggers turned the people into ice. The protagonist made his way past them. He took out his weapon. There was an explosion with lightning. The protagonist cut the people into ice. He squinted through the mask. Changsun said that this was not enough and trash like them should suffer more. Changsun slashed his hand. He touched the fighter's icy face with his hand. System alert. He used the poison blood skill, and now his body produces ice poison. Red poison moved across the fighter's face. System alert. The ice poison reached the victim, and thanks to the poison blood, the ice poison of the ice kite feather daggers became stronger. The protagonist smiled bloodthirstily at the suffering of his opponents. He thought that the additional skill he received after gaining immunity to 10 poisons was poisonous blood, noting that he didn't think he would use it so quickly. A blue glow emanated from the protagonist's eyes. He said that since it wasn't just ice poison, but ice poison enhanced with poison blood, the effect was much stronger. The protagonist walked up the stairs. System notification. The deity of hunting time was enjoying what he was doing. The deity, the snake that coiled around the world, admired his recklessness and watched with interest. The protagonist told his opponents not to bother detoxifying themselves, but to simply die painfully. The stone doors began to close. The protagonist entered the room. System notification. He entered the dungeon of Bastilla's tomb. The protagonist's eyes sparkled brightly. System notification. He has visibility thanks to the laughing mask of Yahello. The protagonist stood with his back to the distance. He thought that this was why Guya lent it to him. The protagonist grinned maliciously. He thought that he probably placed the brazier in front of the boss room so that he could quickly check the keys, adding that if he could get the rewards in the boss room, that would be great. Mold was growing on the walls of the dungeon. System notification. The dungeon mission to loot the tomb has begun. He must defeat the guardian guarding the Bastilla tomb and steal all the treasures in the last room where the owner of the tomb rests. Dim light penetrated the room. System notification. The tomb is divided into 3 large sections, and each section contains things to protect the owner's peace from tomb robbers. The protagonist looked ahead with a serious look. System notification. The deity of hunting time is waiting with interest for his next move. Changsun made his move. He slightly opened his mouth, looking to the side. System alert. The deity of hunting time asks in confusion what is wrong. Changsun told him to come out. The protagonist looked at the wall. System alert. The deity of hunting time says that there is no one there and asks what he is doing. The protagonist looked ahead with a dissatisfied look, asking why he will not come out. Brown-haired turned away, saying that if he does not come out, then he has no choice but to ask the administrator he meets. The protagonist stood motionless. The administrator peeked out from around the corner. Gerald said that he was much more impatient than expected, and he can calm down since everything is fine. Rabbit smiled sheepishly. He said that he was pleased to meet you, introducing himself as the administrator of the dungeon, Gerald. System alert. The deity of hunting time wonders in surprise what that bastard is doing there. Rabbit smiled maliciously. He asked why she was reacting like that, commenting on how angry she was and how it seemed like everyone knew he was there. System alert. The hunting time deity lost her composure and asked what he meant by that. Gerald squinted upward, saying that it was true. The rabbit stared ahead in confusion. System alerts appeared. The hunting time deity looked at the other gods in shock. The snake god coiling around the world asked how a god could be so stupid and shook his head with a look full of pity. The great demon god chasing the abyss looked at the administrator. The owl god piercing the dim light smiled bitterly and consoled the hunting time deity. The hunting time deity gasped and screamed that it was impossible. The protagonist watched intently. System alert. The deity, the time of hunting, praised the administrator's ability to hide, which could deceive even the power of a god. Gerald said that he had never used anything like that. Changsun said that enough of this meaningless talk. The protagonist grinned maliciously. He asked that he was pursuing him to write a report. Gerald looked at the protagonist dumbfoundedly, asking what he knew about the report. Changsun looked up thoughtfully. He said that the training had already ended. Gerald widened his eyes. He thought that the report contained details that the gods wanted to know about, and it was something like an assessment compiled by the Administrative Bureau with precision, wondering how a newbie knew about it. Gerald sat down at his computer. He said that he probably knew more than an ordinary newbie and even rankers, adding that he needed to write about it in the report. The administrator looked at the protagonist with narrowed eyes. Changsun crossed his arms over his chest. The rabbit stared at the laptop monitor in shock. He thought that Changsun was a newbie who was the most talked about in the divine realm and that too many gods were interested in his report, and the Administrative Bureau was putting a lot of pressure on him, adding that he had figured him out and he was also too knowledgeable about the report, and that he had already written about half of his report. The administrator looked in front of him in bewilderment, thinking that if the recording rights were transferred to another administrator. The administrator let tears fall from his eyes, wondering what to do, noting that he did not think they would notice. The rabbit pulled out his eyes. The protagonist said that he could give him the recording rights. The administrator looked at the protagonist with admiration, saying that it was great. The protagonist smiled maliciously, saying that he needed a favor in return. The administrator looked at Changsun with a smile, asking what it was. The protagonist said that he would tell him later. The administrator looked at the protagonist warily, thinking that something was wrong with him. The protagonist grinned maliciously, saying that it would not be difficult, and he would tell him before leaving the dungeon. The rabbit closed his eyes, bowing his head. He said that he had no choice then, and however, he would not be able to do it if it was beyond his power, asking him to understand that. The protagonist smiled maliciously, saying that he didn't have to worry about it, and as far as he understood, the contract was concluded. Particles of light flashed between the boys. System notification. Player Changsun and Administrator Gerald made a mana contract. The rabbit bared his teeth, wondering what he even knew about a mana contract, noting that he was not a newbie, and no one would be surprised if he said that he was a veteran. The protagonist turned around, walking to the side. The administrator followed him. Changsun looked ahead with a serious look. System notification. The snake deity that coils around the world is delighted, since there is someone more cunning than himself. Dim light penetrated the corridor of the room. Heat emanated from the stove. The fighter said that, apparently, the key did not fit this time either. The man punched the wall. The brunette looked at the fighters furiously. The head of High Elf's raiding department, Li Yixing. Yixing asked how many more times they would have to screw up before they finally got the job done.